How long can rigging a complex character take, and how much time exceeds normal reasonable time for rigging a character in both video game and film industries?
So for video games, I don't usually do video game rigging very often, but in like somehow I feel like it'd sort of be the same. It's just for game rigging, you can't do a few things, so it might be simpler to make a game rig, but honestly, I'm not too sure about that. But for me, usually when it comes to like the fully custom rigs that I make, it tends to take like a week or so. But a lot in studios, you will usually have rigging tools. Like one common one Blender users use is Rigify. Um, Rigify is a very popular one, Cloud Rig, all those other auto riggers that people use. They'll speed it up a lot. So you could probably like pump out a whole rig depending on the complexity of the character in like, 1 or 2 days. If you really lock in, you could probably finish it within hours. But when it comes to like exceeding normal reasonable time, the only thing you really have to be worried about is the needs of the production. So what I mean by that is like, you don't want to be bottlenecking the animators from starting to animate by like, just like doing something that's overly complex too early on. Like at Dylan Goose Studios, what we do is we make a proxy rig, which is basically like, we don't really exactly need a model. All we need is just the proportions of the character. And then we make like sort of like a blocked out sort of character. Like it's just cubes and you have like the hair of the character and whatnot. But it's just a very simple type of the character. The weights, you don't need to do any weighting. You don't need to have like the bones be in the exact space, like exact spot that they need to be. And then what we do after that is we make a rough rig where we actually have the model of the character, and then we weight paint that roughly. So doing it this way makes it so that you don't bottleneck the animators, and while you're rigging, you can add the animators can do their thing at the same time. So it really just depends on the production.
Blender or Maya?
I mean, I'm a little biased, but I think a lot of indie studios right now are using Blender, because it's free and there's a bunch of tutorials out there, and it's with the tutorials, it's really easy to learn a lot of the things that you need to like join the industry. But even if you use Blender, the skills are still transferable to Maya. So honestly, you can use either. And I know a lot of people that go to like university and they have to use like, Maya there, but they like for their personal projects, they just use Blender. So really the skills are just transferable. And if you watch Blender Conference, even even some sort of big studios are using it. Like I know Blue Zoo and Framestore did like a talk at Blender Conference about how they use like Blender for like layout and just production stuff basically. But I do know of like 2 cool Japanese studios that do it. Like one is Wit Studio. They used Blender for layout on Ranking of Kings. So if you want to join the Japanese industry, you could probably do that. But also there's Sanzigen, which do the entire production in Blender. They make the ones that really stand out to me are the talks, the music videos for the VTuber Hosho Marin. They made these really awesome just like music videos, and they looked awesome. The animation was like, just honestly, sometimes I was like, is this 2D? I didn't even like, I was completely fooled. But yeah, Blender is like evolving quite a lot. So, if you want to start off with Blender and then you want to work for like a AAA studio that still uses Maya, then you can just do that. The skills are transferable. So there's no need to like stay locked in on a software. And I think staying locked in on a software is probably the worst thing you can do, because there's a bunch of softwares coming out. There's like well, I wouldn't say coming out, but there's a lot of softwares out there that you might need to learn for different studios, different jobs. Like some Japanese studios even still use like uh, Lightwave or 3ds Max, or I don't know what Lightwave was. I don't think that's the name of it, but yeah, they still use a lot of the old softwares. So just depends on the job. Like whatever studio you want to work for, pick that software. Or if you're just starting off, pick Blender, learn the tutorials, and if you really need to, just switch to Maya or switch to whichever software you need.
How do you rig long hair, both realistic and stylized, and how much time does it take? It looks like it's finicky to say the least.
It really depends on how like complex the character's hair is, because you have characters like that have sort of straighter hair. Like Miyabi has somewhat straight hair. It's still like it's not as complex as other characters. Like if you look at Cantarella from Wuthering Waves, she has like all sorts of curls and stuff like that, and that stuff, like that type of hair, would take quite a while to rig. It shouldn't take too long, but like if you had a character like Cantarella, you'd probably need a while. But the important thing to think about when you're thinking about hair is to think about like hair as sort of clumps, and seeing how many like if a clump can be sort of reduced into only one bone. You also need to think about like levels of detail, like when it comes to the different like part of the characters, right? If you're talking about this face, you'd probably want the bangs of the character to have more like detail on the bones than the back, or some of the side hair, because you wouldn't see that very often. So you'd want less bones for that. For like the back, you usually want less bones, but also you want to have a single bone controlling many other bones, or just controlling the entire clump. I'd say, because I've rigged a character before that had some hair hidden behind his like he had this cape and it was like a big collar. Honestly, you don't really need to do that much weight painting. You don't need to add that much bones. If the hair is occluded by something or it's hidden, you probably only need like just some rough weight painting, and then you're done with it. It's just understanding how much detail, or how often the part of the hair is going to be seen, and then you're pretty much good. Just use FK chains and stuff like that. You don't need to overcomplicate it that much.
What's the best way to approach long and flowy clothes for stylized characters?
Long and flowy clothes. So when I think of that, I think of like skirts, stuff that hangs off the character. Like imagine a kimono and a long sleeve. And I feel like the best way to approach those is to rig with the animator in mind. Like keep them in mind when you're rigging the character. Any sort of feature that you have, any idea, is like you'd want to make the life easier for the animators, basically. So what I mean by that is you make the life easier for the animator by adding like new features and stuff. Like what I like doing is, if a character has a really long skirt, or just a skirt in general, usually what people would do is they would just simple like just weight paint the skirt to the legs, but that doesn't look that good. It causes artifacts, and sometimes like if the skirt is very long, it also causes some problems. So it's important to rig with the animator in mind, to just give them something to work off of. And so here, let me just show it actually. So the skirt here follows the leg. It's not weight painted to it because you still have control over it, but it still follows the leg and gives the animator something to work off of, like when they get to the physics layer. And you can tweak it. You have like these sort of tweaks if you want to give it any sort of shape. If there's like occasional clipping and whatnot. So like you have clipping here, you can just move this up, and there you go. This is just an IK spline setup, but there's like IK splines on each part, And then I also have an FK layer under this that you can grab, move around, and just tweak it. So whatever the animator needs, they have it in the skirt rig. Like they don't need they'll have something to work off of. Just like put them into the rig, and if the animator doesn't need them, you can add a switch to just turn them off, or they just won't use them at all. Like it's better to have these tools than not have them, because animators already have like pretty hard job animating all these characters with like ton of accessories and stuff. Like Miyavi has her ginormous sleeve, so it's important, and like the animators will love you for this. It's important to just make these like animating these characters with just ginormous cloth and all this other stuff just as easy as possible for these animators.
How does one rig oddly shaped clothing that doesn't fit the form of the body exactly, such as puffy sleeves, off-shoulder sleeves, etc.?
I'd say when it comes to that, like the closest thing I have in mind is Anby. It's usually weight painting honestly does most of the job. Like shoulder sleeves and stuff, if you really need a specific, like if the silhouette's getting messed up, or if there's a lot of volume loss in the puffy sleeve and whatnot, you can probably just add a corrective, either a corrective shape key or a corrective bone, something that makes the silhouette of the character look good, and like makes that like, oh yeah, this sleeve is like connected to the main part, it's just off the shoulders. But honestly, a lot of the work just comes from having a good weight paint. That's really it.
Is rigging stylized characters easier than realistic ones? I mean, you don't have to always be anatomically correct, you can exaggerate facial expressions. It should be easier, right?
Not really. They do present different challenges. Like for realistic ones, you need to know anatomy, and you do need to know anatomy for stylized characters as well, because you need to know where like the bones are, where your joints are and how they move. But for realistic characters, especially like when you're rigging around the face, a lot of the difficulty comes from rigging the face. The face for realistic characters, you need to know the muscles. You need to have all the parts of the rig working together. And if anything really looks off, if you're working in like, I don't know, like a more realistic production, say for like a cinematic, and you're working with like at ILM for VFX or something, then if any part of the character feels off, any part of the rigging feels off, then it's going to be like uncanny. For stylized characters, it's more of like a game of flexibility. You need to have them as flexible as possible. Like when you have exaggerated expressions and whatnot, your rig needs to be flexible enough that they can do that. I think one good example is the cat guy from Amazing Digital Circus. I don't remember what his name was, but somebody made a post on Twitter about how they created like a fan rig for this character, and like his mouth just opens up massive. Like his head is usually this big, but then he opens his mouth and it becomes like this, and you can like see through the middle. And I don't even know how to do that. Like that is pretty insane to see. But like stuff like that, realistic characters and stylized characters present different challenges. Stylized rigging, you need to make a flexible rig and deal with unusual proportions. Like, for that guy, he has massive eyes. He needs to have like a crazy flexible mouth to just be able to do whatever he wants with it. And like sometimes you need like rubber hose stuff, but usually I feel like that's just the thing that Rigify rigs have, so it's not as complex a thing to do. But occasionally you will need to rig a character that has like a weird torso, ginormous shoes, stuff like that. For realistic characters, it's more a matter of getting something that feels human on camera. And you know, knowing all the anatomy, knowing all how muscles interact with each other and all that. So it's hard to compare the two because they do present different challenges.
How do you set up jiggle physics?
For so how Hoyoverse does it, and like the rigs that I post on my page do it. It's basically just bones with soft influence. Like they don't have full influence. They don't have too little influence. I can actually just show you. It's just bones with soft influence. There's a bunch of ways to doing this, but this is probably the simplest way. And I do know that Hoyoverse does not like, or they, I don't know if they don't like, but I do know they don't use any simulation, at least on the characters. Everything is hand animated. So the jiggle physics are hand animated. The hair is hand animated. The skirts are hand animated. But so just, I mean, look at that. It's basically just a bone that has soft influence. If I pull up the deformation layer real quick, actually, as well. Hold on. Where did I put it? I don't know where I put it. Are these the deformation rows? Oh, these are the deformation rows. So if I switch into the weight paint mode real quick, so these bones just have sort of a green influence, and this is kind of like 0.5. If I go into vertex select and click on like, you know, the exact middle of where this weight painting sort of is, you can see that this thigh shake.l bone has a influence of just 0.4. And up here, there's another bone which controls like this sort of knee socks part of the area. It only has like, it has 0.4 as well. The thigh still has like 0.1 up here, but it's not like a crazy amount of influence. And this is probably the most like optimized way of doing it, and the way that the animators actually have the most control. Because when it comes to like physics simulations, like, you know, clot simulations and whatnot, soft bodies, you have to like, it's finicky. You gotta like, you know, you gotta tweak the settings. You gotta do all this stuff. It may give like a better result that looks better on screen, but this one is more subtle. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to put too much effort into it. You can just animate it, you know, put it on like, you know, space switch it, put it like bake the animation back onto it, and then, you know, offset the keys, and there you go. You got jiggle physics. When it comes to physics simulations, I do know of one add-on. I don't think I've used it once. It was all right. It's like I think it was called Simplicage. But you know, it did take a lot of like tweaking and stuff. So yeah, honestly, if you need jiggle physics like really fast, put on a bone, slap on 0.4 influence, animate it, you got it. It's done.
How do you create a proper rig with drivers?
So drivers are just a feature that you put into a rig. It just supports the rig basically. You know, if you need to automate a sort of, you know, if you need to automate one property affecting another, say like, you know, if you wanted a bone when it moves on, you know, its transformation y-axis, so it moves up, you'd want another bone like rotating like 90 degrees, you say. So all you need to do is probably it's probably easier to just give a demo, honestly. So let me open up a new blend file. So drivers are this purple thing that you just add to anything. So you add a driver here, and it just turns this thing purple. And you get a variable, and you can select another object to affect the transformation channel. So if I just delete this driver, and let's say I want this cube to rotate when this cube moves up. So I look at this and I see Z is moving up by 2.5. So what I can do is I can right click this and I can copy this as a new driver. And then I click on this one and say what axis do I want to rotate on? I want to rotate on the Y axis. So I paste it on there. And now you get this sort of interaction where moving this drives this one into rotating. So this can be used a lot of different ways. Like it's honestly, you can't really, if you want to make a complex rig, you need to know how to use drivers. And the simplest way of just using these is with custom properties. Say like I have a an IK-FK switch. And when I switch the IK to like the IK property to 1, I want it to be on IK. If I switch it to 0, I want it to be on FK. So what you do is you copy this as a driver, and then you put it on the constraint of the bone. Well, it's more complex because you have like, layers and stuff. And the IK and FK bones are usually constrained to like a switch layer, like chain, that controls whether to switch them on or off. And then you put that driver on the constraint of those bones, and they switch whenever you have it at like 1 or 0. When I switch this, it would switch to the other one. Any keyframe, anything that can be keyframed can be driven. So if I keyframe, like, this is just a simple example. The y-axis can be keyframed, so I can drive it. If I put a copy rotation constraint onto the other cube from pointing towards this one, and I want to like rotate this one, but I also want like a custom property that I want it to stop copying the rotation at some point. I can put a custom property on here to affect the influence. And if I want to copy this as a driver, let's call this like rot follow, or rotation follow. Press OK on that. And then, where was it again? Paste the driver and switch this off. And you can see that it just turns off the rotation. And then I can turn it back on. And now it's following the rotation. Or I can set it to like 50%. And now it's following the rotation 50%. For rotation constraints, this can cause like Euler issues, Euler lock, gimbal lock issues. So I'd be wary of that. But you get the point. Drivers are needed to affect other bones from other bones into doing the things that you want, or properties.
Repairing rigs is like being a proctologist of the 3D world. Would you agree that it is indeed one of the most challenging tasks a digital artist can face?
I feel like, well, actually, when you sent me that question, I was like, "What's a proctologist?" And I looked it up. I was like, "Oh." I wasn't expecting that type of doctor. But anyway, rigging, I feel, isn't as difficult. Well, it is still a difficult discipline, but it's really only hard at the beginning when you don't know the fundamentals. When you know the fundamentals, it's really easy to get into the flow state and just doing, really the only difficulty that comes after knowing the fundamentals is trying to figure out new rig systems. Say like, you wanted to automate the skirt, which is something that I've done. It took me a while to research and come up with ideas for the automatic skirt system. Originally, I started off, I think I had 3 revisions of it. The first one was much simpler. It used only transformation constraints. And, it had like a few issues where it gimbal locked because I was using copy rotation constraints. And then on my second iteration, I used a different system. And on my third system, I used like, the final system where it uses action constraints and aim spaces. But once you know the fundamentals, it's really easy to make those systems and research them and come up with new ideas. And having having access to a lot of the information online, I think it makes it much more. It's much makes it much easier to learn rigging. I do know CG Dive has his like Rigify course, but I feel like I don't think you should start off with Rigify. Well, you can probably start off with Rigify just to get yourself acquainted with weight painting and not having to worry about you know, making a whole entire rig from scratch. But once you really, once you feel like Rigify is slowing you down and you don't feel like you're getting the same amount of value from Rigify as you would like from, just doing it yourself, taking a course, like I do know Pierre Picot has his like, that guy's a goat, by the way. He has his Art of Effective Rigging 2 course. That course basically taught me everything I need to know. That course is incredible. I would recommend it to anybody who wants to learn rigging. And once you take that course, once you learn those fundamentals, once you really make rigs and learn rigging and drivers and all those things, it's really not that difficult. Like it's really just a game of like rigging fast, getting rigs out there, getting rigs done, and researching stuff to make the animators' lives easier.
Whom would you call the most talented 3D rigging artist to ever live, and why? Besides yourself, of course.
Ah, nah. I'm not that good. In terms of rigging, I feel like there's a lot of different disciplines. Like we talked earlier about the different challenges of stylized characters and realistic characters. So it's really hard to say, just the best rigger of all time. I feel like I know, honestly, some random just Twitter artist out there, like the guy who made the amazing digital circus rig, is like, that's already pretty up there. That's already pretty crazy. I don't usually see stuff like that very often. But in terms of just generally who is the best, I don't know. Like Pierre Picot, I love that guy. He makes like just really good rigs, and his rigs are intuitive to use. The rig UI is really nice. I know in Maya there's Keel Figgins. He makes really nice rigs. His rigs are really appealing and stuff. But if I were to just pick like a champion of rigging, I can't choose. There's just too many options.
Ellen Joe rig when?
I don't think I'd be making an Ellen Joe rig. I have no plans to make an Ellen Joe rig. I tend to rig characters if they really, if there was something that I would animate, or if they like appeal to me, like their character. But I don't think I'd rig Ellen Joe. But I'm sure there's a rig out there for her.